Gabe,
Yes, Jack.
it's you and I.
Together again.
Yesterday was the first non-walk we didn't do, but I enjoyed the conversation. And aside from the trip up to the Palisades and witnessing the devastation up there, the very confounding experience, uh, I think that's the first time we didn't get to actually walk. But I enjoyed the conversation a lot and the time taken.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. To kick things off, I'm doing well, surprisingly, I guess to say. Um, just a little global background. I haven't, really had a panic attack since that one thing a little month or two ago, but before that, it's been months. And the thinking and the future tripping and the past wrenching and all of that, I really make a conscious effort these days to leave it alone, to not go down those holes, um, to take things as they come. And yesterday was my wedding anniversary, and we had a great day, really just a wonderful
Hmm.
day. Spending time with each other, with the family, and doing our own things and coming back. And it was really just a great, great day. So I'm very,
17 years.
yeah, 17 years. Some of those were tough, tougher
Yeah.
than others, um, especially during the drinking years. But now I take things as they come, and I don't try and control them and manipulate them and, you know, control them into what I need and what I want and how I live and all this stuff. It happens as it comes. Some things are bad. There's been some deaths in the family, that extended family, that are unfortunate and sad, and some people are getting older, and the birthdays keep ticking along, and new people are born, and at my wedding anniversary, uh my wife's niece and nephew were like little babies at the wedding. You know how you have like babies at the wedding.
Hmm.
Now they've been accepted to some great colleges, and they're on their way to start their lives. Um, so it's a little bit of a trip to see how the time passes, but to go
And
back.
probably some of those things that you used to preoccupy yourself worrying about haven't happened, and other things that you didn't bother to think about did happen.
Yes.
I think what I'm hearing, Gabe, is that there's flexibility and adjustability in your experience compared to feeling as though it's all happening to you and you have nothing to do with it. There's nothing you can do about it.
But not only that, but waiting, expecting, hoping, and dreading that it will all happen
Yes.
at the very next moment.
Right. Well, and that tends to, when you start seeing things honestly, which is seeing that we're choosing what we're doing in relation to what's happening, and we can also not choose what we're doing in relation to what's happening. The basis of addiction is the idea that I have no choice. And it's interesting that within the insanity, we use choice as the excuse to say we don't have it, when choice always allows not to be chosen, which is the whole fundamental principle of what choice is. So you can see how the lie sort of invades the story that goes with it. We use the thing that actually gives us the freedom to make a choice, to come to any conclusion we'd like, and then blame it. Choice is the problem. I don't have it anymore. I don't have any choice. Now, doesn't mean there aren't circumstances that give us an impression there's nothing else we can do, because it may be the best thing we can do, especially in the immediacy of a threat or some unexpected experience. But my experience has been, the quicker I react to those unexpected things, the more I perpetuate the wrong in them, rather than take a breath and start looking at it and consider it and start to notice that I actually do have a much broader potential. The book says, pause when agitated, for good reason. If I make decisions based on desperation, I make desperate decisions leading to desperate actions. Because it is a desperate act. Thinking is an action, it's a choice. How and what we think is a choice. Thinking may not be a choice because it's just something we do. But the how and the what is what we choose.
Yeah, and our discussions and our, I guess, years of work now have really changed my life and expanded it um, to a much greater potential. Um, it's been amazing. And those within the sound of my voice hopefully can hear that there is a chance, a possibility to make a change with some work and effort, concentration, uh, some setbacks and some step forwards. To really look at it, like you said, I think when we first met, uh, your biggest word was consider, and that was it. And, you didn't say you must do this,
Yeah.
write this down, do this, report back to me as homework for a 5-year old or anything like that.
As a dutiful subject.
Yeah, as a dutiful subject. Yeah. Just, just consider, just
Yeah.
consider XYZ, whatever they may be. Your thoughts aren't real. Your thoughts are lies. What isn't happening is happening, and what is happening isn't happening. Just consider. And I think for those listening, if you could just consider, take into account what is happening, and your part in it, I think it's profound for finding.
Yes, exactly. And the I think the more global implication is that whatever is occurring that I am struggling with is coming from a malign thought. It isn't my thoughts that are wrong, it's the how and why in my thought, the content of my thoughts that's struggling. Thoughts are actually literally designed to express reality. That's the point of them. That means life's terms are designed to be expressed in thinking. So when we're thinking straight, literally aligned with what's happening, and not making a preoccupation consuming mess out of what's happening. While we become so consumed by it, we think it's all that's happening because it's like putting your face to the earth and wondering why you can't seem to take directions. You kind of lose focus.
Yeah, I mean, just another quick example was with your wife yesterday in the morning when you're talking about the bed and stuff. What is happening, and she didn't like that answer. So,
What was it, the bed? The
the yeah,
maid.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. The maid's gone, so she's been gone. Her sister died. She's been gone for 6 weeks. So we've got a crisis in the house.
yeah. But the thinking is that one of the possibilities is she may never return.
Yeah,
The other possibility is she's back tomorrow. But
yeah. Well, and starting to see things accurately, like realizing that everything that's happening is happening right now. And if everything that's happening is happening right now, it's a pretty good indication that where I can best serve my interests as a human and other people's interest is in the present. Now, I would suggest we're never anywhere but in the present. And to think we're not in the present because we're not thinking about what's happening in the present shows how much of an investment we have in making believe that thinking is our source. So if I'm thinking about Paris, I do that thing at the men's retreat every year. I say, everybody think about France or Paris. 90% of everybody thinks about the Eiffel Tower.
mhm.
And I said, so where are you now? Are you in Paris? You here? You know, we can think about things, and when they're justified within the obsessive thinking, it's the obsessive thinking that's actually causing the pain, because it's the obsessive thinking that we have been maintaining as though someday we'll make it right and make it true and make it real. Because the obsession is, it's impossible to turn a thought into reality that has no basis in reality. And so the time it takes to do that seems so consuming that nothing else seems to be happening. And that idea that we can be not in the present because nothing else is happening but this consuming nature of thinking about thinking about thinking about thinking about thinking is a huge misstep, because it's just something we're doing. It isn't something we are, it's something we've chosen to do, because we don't do things we don't choose. Those are decisions we make to have that occur.
Let's pause on that note you just mentioned. about thinking about things that are indeed possible. Like when I heard that, I thought of, not so ancient humans, looking to the sky and the birds in the air and thinking, let's fly, 100,000 years ago, but more like maybe I can take one of these rounded rocks and make a wheel out of it or something, like some thinking that's aligned with possibility of utility, of usefulness or pleasure or whatever it
Yeah.
is, that there's not this desire to fly out into the flat earth world, instantaneously, but maybe grow some vegetables for my family, and this, I see vegetables growing, how can that help? Like sort of taking utility out of what is indeed possible.
Well, and even in that consideration, Gabe, remember I think it was Isis, the bird that was designed to fly, but it had wax on its wings, and the higher it got, the closer to the sun, the closer it failed.
Yeah, what's his name? Yeah.
So there was, I forget what the name is, but the concept was there, right? We watched things fly. It sort of suggested to people maybe we can fly, and that's what imagination is about. Imagination is about looking out there and seeing the range of possibilities that's extraordinary, rather than simply imagining those things that are impossible to be the only possibility. And that's addiction. That's the sickness. I read something that Aristotle said yesterday, and that was that even evil destroys even itself. And I would say that's a great, great quote for addiction. Here's Katie leaving. No, it's Gabe. Morning, sweetheart. See you later.
Well, yeah,
So I think part of the problem, though, in terms of human endeavor, is that we've been so fixated on defining what we're doing and coming up with words to construct what we're doing that are accurate enough. And everyone seems to have a different idea of what those words mean. So whenever we're conveying in words, we're always conveying something that is mistaken, which is why that game of telephone, even when you're young and even today, if you ask people to repeat what you just said, 9 times out of 10 or more, you're going to find that people didn't hear you because they're thinking about what they think you're saying to serve their interest in whatever way they think is critical to their life and their thing, because that life they think they are is based in thought. So one of the divergence here in this discussion is to start to see that if everything that's possible is possible, without defining any of it, that's a very stable premise to notice is in fact the case, regardless of whether we think about it. But to align my thinking with the fact that what's possible is possible while I'm considering possibilities, I begin looking at it not as trying to take something impossible and turn it into possible, but notice the difference between possibility and impossibility is the effect on my experience. And one of the things that affects my experience is I find more wonder in the possibility. When I know that all that's possible is possible, and I concede rather than think about it as something I need to know in my thinking, I just begin to concede that that's been the fact the whole time. Everything that's been possible has always been possible. Sort of like if an
yeah.
absolute nature is absolute, it's absolute. And starting to concede that puts me on a premise that aligns me. My thoughts now are based on a stable basis in a general way. Now I can start looking out there with imagination and say, oh, everything that's possible is possible. So if I'm thinking in terms that are aligned with that, I'm going to have a very different sense about things as I go than thinking from a point of view that impossible is possible and the only possibility that's already conflicted. And that all starts from making believe my thinking is reality, my thinking is true, and it must be right as a result.
Well, that's what you gotta go back over that of that's the key, and that's the addiction, is the thinking possible things aren't possible, and the converse of that
Right.
impossible. Well, that's at the root of it for me. That, for one of
Yeah.
them. That's, you really got to focus on that, Jack. Expand that thought of this happened. This may be the result of that happening, but somehow I'm fixated on these other 10 results that probably won't happen, but they are for me very real, and I need to start planning on them being real, and just going down this stream of consciousness in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's literally swimming upstream, which
Yeah.
is why it's so exhausting and why it takes so much anxiety and stress, because we know the river is going to win. There's only so long you can swim upstream before the river wins if it's running downstream. If it's not, it's a lake.
Yeah.
So at the root of it all, and this is, I believe, what you're asking, if I'm hearing you correctly, at the root of it is that if the basic ideas I have about reality are wrong within the context of my thinking, and I think they're right, I'm going to look out into the world to find impossibilities and try to make them right to support the contention that that thinking I'm doing is right. You follow me?
No, say that again.
If I am wrong about the thinking I'm doing and I think it's right, so think of this conflict. Let's say we think 2 + 2 is 5, and I'm doing math problems over and over and over and over again. And because I think 2 + 2 is 5, I'm operating on the basis that I don't need to consider that anymore. And now I'm looking in everything else I'm doing that I may be doing perfectly right in terms of the order of mathematics. And yet it keeps ending up wrong. And so I start creating these hallucinations about math is wrong. There's a conspiracy going on against me. Math is wrong and it's attacking me. I'm now being affected by this thing because I can't get it right. It's wrong, not the fact that I have an idea that is based on something wrong as right. If I'm operating at the most fundamental premise in my thinking, that thinking is reality, and that is not true, then everything I'm going to do is try to prove that a lie is true. That's the first step. We were talking about that yesterday. First step is not about alcohol. Bill tells us that in the big book. Alcohol is a symptom and a symbol. The bottle is a symbol. What are they a symbol of? An underlying mental cause. What's the mental cause? Lying. What did I think? I could control and enjoy my drinking. For as long as I had that thought, I tried to prove it by drinking out of control. And I thought drinking out of control because I didn't get arrested and I could still walk and I could still talk and do all those things, which I rehearsed over and over and over again, including doing the sobriety checkpoint thing in my bedroom on one foot at night in both directions to be sure that I was ready for that. I didn't think about not drinking and driving. I thought about preparing for the arrest. So if the fundamental thinking about thinking is wrong and we think it's right, everything we're striving for is simply a process of out of all possibilities, which is, keep in mind that one of the possibilities that's possible is to think that impossibility is possible. Now think about trying to do something that functions on the basis of thinking that impossibility is possible. I'm going to spend a lifetime going down a failing road and not notice that the disturbance in my own experience is telling me the whole time I'm on a path that is not workable. Because the basis of it is gnawing at me because I know better. I have a better awareness of that. Because the nature of nature is my nature, just as it's your nature. It's an indivisible, absolute, synchronous, simultaneous, symmetrical essence of knowledge. It's absolute knowledge. It's not thinking knowledge where I think I know something because I've done it right and it works. But even in that, if I know something works, I will tend to repeat that, which is why species tend to pick up very quickly all those little traits that are adapted. Along the way, they start saying, oh, you can crack a coconut on a rock. And all of a sudden, sea otters are using rocks to crack shells for mussels and all that. There's a process that goes on. If it works, everyone else wants to take advantage of it because they don't have to go through the process of elimination that it took for that first person to say, oh, this is a good idea. This might be a good idea. And it works. So my
Right.
sense is that knowing nature is our guidance system, The disturbance inside, the sense of conflict, is not an accident. It's actually a guidance system telling us we're on a path that has nowhere to go because it does not connect to reality. The thought it's connected to may be thought to be reality, and it may be thought to be right. But if it isn't right and it isn't real, we're literally experiencing, I don't belong here. I can't seem to make any progress. I keep crying out these words and not notice that I'm actually admitting that the thought I have has no place. I keep looking for a place to belong and I can't seem to find it. So I feel useless. What's useless is the thinking I'm using in that endeavor. And so, to the point of reaction, reactions are a react over and over and over. Same act, same act, same act, same act. Defensive, defiant, denial, delusion, all in the same bucket. To make believe that if I act on those things that way reactively, somehow it's all going to get better. And that's addiction. That's the beginning of addiction. The next point is impulsivity. I'm uneasy. I don't feel comfortable. I can't sit still. I got to do something. I got to get somewhere. Compulsive actions are next. And they're almost simultaneous. And I would say for every obsessive thought we have a compulsive activity going on in some way. We're distracting ourselves. We're paying attention to things that seem to have hope and promise that have no hope and promise. And if you're looking at something with no hope and promise, you can have all the hope there possibly is and never have enough. And you can have all the faith there is and never have enough. Well, if you look at something that actually does have promise and is real, you need very little hope or faith or any of it to realize its benefit and value. It just happens in terms of the utilization you pointed out. And that's very rewarding to humans because it is fulfilling, because the fulfillment of our nature is being recognized and expressed. It's already here. It isn't somewhere else. We keep thinking we're looking for it, going somewhere to get it. It's here. The question is, why do we keep thinking it's not here? And I would say because we keep thinking we're not here, that we should be somewhere else with something else.
Where are you?
Yeah, we have a sense of self that isn't who we are. It's this thing we call ego, and now we've formalized it to become this inherent part of our experience, which is basically saying that addiction is an absolute natural state for humans. It isn't. It hasn't been. It won't be. It can't be. But it can be chosen as an option of possibility. And what are the consequences? Demoralization. Why? It's immoral. Incomprehensible. Why? We can't make sense out of it. Book says incomprehensible demoralization. What are the character defects? All the defects of character I have in the persona that I've developed and claim to be mine, when in fact they're just simply thoughts I have about my thinking. Itself, not myself. So the book says we tell our stories in a general way. What does that mean? I tried.
That history of your drinking.
Yeah, not every detail. Just I tried, I failed. I heard there was a solution. I began to open up to. I began to become objective where I'd been solely subjective in my thinking. And my sense is step one is about subjectivity, pathological subjectivity, narcissism, this idea of self-centeredness, having a self at the center when really all it is thought-centeredness. But now it's been mistaken as self because I think I'm the creator of reality when I think my thoughts are real. So who must I first create? Myself. That isn't true. It's just a thought I have about a thought itself. So what's step two? Came to believe in a power greater than ourselves. What would that power be? Beyond our thinking, something else, rather than think that our limits of the orbit of our self is this circle that we keep going around and around and around in, this vicious cycle, is to begin to see that the end of those thoughts that I've been defending is indefensible because it's the beginning of everything else at the end. There is no end. It's the beginning of everything within a subjective, objective experience. They're merged, just like the opposites, good and bad. You can't have good without bad. You can't have up without down. You can't have down without up. They're related. They're intimately connected.
These are, I don't know, these are, for me, my experiences, I've had to sit with these concepts, take steps back and forward with these concepts over the past, 7, 8 years to really get a hold. And sometimes people can get it sooner or later, but for those listening, for me, it's been a journey, a connection. I think the weekly connection helps. It sort of grounds me, to come to you guys and other friends and other people and just sort of practice the exercises during the week and then come to the game on Sunday. So
Mhm.
it's been helpful, but it's been a process. Although there was a little bit of a white light moment in the beginning of our conversation, Jack, for me, but it made perfect sense at that exact moment. But
So let's look at that term, white light.
yeah,
If the sum total of all colors is white, we would literally be blinded by that light if it were here in our human experience. It's like looking at the sun,
yeah,
right? It will blind you. It's obviously bright and it's obviously full of all colors because it's just a massive amount of light emitting naturally within this universe, but it'll blind you. And yet we seem to fear the darkness is something that's blind when that's an absence of light, right? We think of haunting and all that stuff as shadows of doubt, haunting. But if the whiteness of that light is in fact something that shines a light on the darkness, if we can start noticing the shadows are actually being illuminated by that light, it starts to become it isn't, to see things as subjective and objective to begin with is the beginning of seeing that when you see them as together rather than apart, you begin to see the absolute nature of nature very quickly. So we're going from subjective to objective and then realizing, oh, if the two of those are really the same thing, it's just a difference in how I'm positioning myself, my experience, not even myself, but how I'm positioning my experience of subjectivity and objectivity. They're just positions I'm taking. Well, if it's all that there is, and everyone is able to take any position they want, I would not be offended by anybody taking any position that isn't the one I take. And yet, largely in humanity, we're often fighting over the positions people take as though they shouldn't. I can, but they can't. So that's coming from that same thinking that my thinking is real. So nobody else has real thinking. They're all thinking lies. We're blaming them for what we're doing because it's unconscionable within insanity to admit it's insane because that would be sane. And it would dispel the whole rumor that we're projecting and pretending is in fact our plight. We're the one creating it and acting as though we have nothing to do with it. So in those general ideas, in my experience, reading the Course in Miracles really helped because it simply said, reality is real. It's all that exists, period. Didn't go any further than that. I thought, oh, well, that's an absolute statement. And I started considering that. And I started seeing what Bill was talking about in terms of the absolutes, because the steps came out of the four absolutes of the Oxford group. Unselfishness, honesty, love, and what was it? Purity. So think about purity. Purity is obviously not impure, and love is not conditional, and honesty is not dishonesty, and unselfishness means no self. Literally doesn't mean get your sick self better and try to nurse it into health so you can have a really healthy sick self. It's saying there isn't anything. He says, let go absolutely. It's not a torture test. It's starting to see that we've been hanging on to ideas that don't even exist. We've been hanging on to nothing as something. That's a conflict, naturally. And if you look at the words, like you said, that white light moment, if you're seeing clearly, you're going to see the disturbances clearly, and they're going to be disturbances rather than things to deny and defy and fight and pretend aren't there. The sanity of it is, oh, I still have some work to do. I still harbor thoughts that I don't even think I'm having. these thoughts seem to haunt me because I want to pretend I don't have them. When I stop being haunted by them, I just start seeing it's disgusting to continue to maintain them and to feel disgusted with something that is disgusting, just like feeling disturbed by something that is disturbing, is the accurate aligned response. And that's often mistaken in this discussion. Because within addiction, the idea is I'm going to stop thinking about negative thoughts. And all I'm going to do is have positive thoughts, which is impossible, by the way, because the two are connected. But by
Yes.
doing that, I'm going to get better. And what I'm really getting better at is becoming numb to these things I claim I'm not doing. So what I'm doing is becoming a master at lying effectively.
Yeah, that's good.
Certainly isn't honest, because if I'm honest, I can talk about my thoughts, whether they're right or wrong, freely without any regard for how other people think about it, except for the fact that I know they're going to think what they think. Just like I know what's possible is possible, I know people are going to think what they think and how they think. And that's the one thing we each have, which I think is also critical in step one. And I'll get into this further when I feel like I have an outline worth relying on. But the whole idea of diagnosing addiction can only be done by the individual who is addicted. And it's really pointing to this free will we have. And it doesn't mean that we can be free in every respect with what we do. It means within the range of possibilities that we have as humans, we are free to choose those possibilities. And one of those possibilities is to think that what's impossible is possible. And to begin to see that, if I'm free, that's really love. That latitude to be able to go wrong and correct under my own guidance system, because that guidance system is the same for all of it. If it's love, if that's the basis of reality and truth, because it's generous and supportive and all knowing and all everything, always present, always, always, always is what something absolute is, then it's everything and also nothing at the same time. Nothing meaning it's not a thing. It's an essence that isn't a thing. It isn't a spatially bound, time bound thing that we talk about so often as being everything. It's now something that isn't a thing. So nothing really is something, because it begins to, just like zero can neutralize any number, turn it into zero. It starts to notice the freedom. We can take all the positions we want. We can notice that we have no obligation to take any of them. And we can be accountable for the impacts we're having by accounting for the actions we're taking in all respects. Doesn't mean we're not going to be caught off guard, which reveals the defensiveness we have about the thoughts, because obsessive thoughts are based in defense, based in defiance, based in denial. It isn't the wrong thought that plagues us, it's the thought that it's right that plagues us. And as soon as we do, we feel disturbed. Immediately, there's a nervousness that comes with that because we know we're creating the fear. But what do we do within the sickness? Blame it on the world. Blame it on humans are sick. They're greedy. They're spiteful. They're hateful. And all of those terms that we're using about them is exactly what is being maintained in the thinking about the self we have: hateful, spiteful, harmful, vengeful, disgusting. That's who we think we are. But we don't want to admit it because we blame it on everybody else. And again, you create that divisiveness when in fact there is no divisiveness, and in the essence of indivisibility doesn't exist. But we can choose it, and we can manifest experiences and effects as a result of it. That doesn't mean we create reality. It means we cause effects that we experience clearly. So thinking in absolute terms, if you think about something correctly for the first time and simply concede it, it seems like white light because the darkness and the shadows that you've been maintaining and the defensiveness and the denial that have been causing those impacts, those shadows of doubt, disappear. And by the same token, To any degree you're feeling those shadows of doubt and that disgusting nature about who you think you are and all that, you are maintaining a thought that has no basis in reality. It's only based about in a thought to be real and true, and as a result, right. And then the only thing you can do, interesting, we're free to choose, and yet we come up with things that give us the impression that it's the only thing we can do, so we can only continue to do the wrong thing. That's exactly addiction in a nutshell, in every respect, for all the symptoms.
Yeah, it's the only thing I can do.
Which is a lie. Because the truth about that, if we're looking at truth, is it's the only thing I'm doing. It isn't the only thing I can do. It just happens to be the thing I'm doing. That's the honesty about it. Well, no, I'm doing that. Okay. Well, when I say I'm doing it, I can undo it. When I say it's the only thing I can do, the lie is going to create the desperation to come up with another rationalization, justification, excuse, etc., to continue to develop the narrative that there is nothing else I can do. And if you listen to people's stories, they'll tell you exactly that. It's her, she's never going to change, they're never going to change. Well, the person saying that is not changing. What they're thinking about that person they think isn't changing. And yet, we're always changing. I mean, talk about absolute. If everything in the universe is changing all the time and we talk about people not changing, that's not true. They're always changing. They're just fighting to maintain this semblance of stability so they don't look like hypocrites by maintaining lies without revealing they're a lie. That defense, you can see that defensiveness in people. They get very offended by comments that don't align with their that thing they're trying to project is who they are, that appearance they're trying to make or maintain. I find it with my granddaughter. I don't find it with most people, but my granddaughter, I mean, it just annoys the piss out of me that she has no seeming awareness that I have any value in this world. She's 14 and she can dismiss me and it just cuts to my bone. And I realize that that proximity I have with her in the DNA structure that we share gets very close to the heart of that accumulated impact that culture has been perpetuating through history that has actually been assimilated within the DNA structure of our experience. We're the sum total of all the DNA that's ever happened. And a lot of that adjusted DNA adjusts all the time. A lot of those adjustments have been made under the stress of insanity. And a body that's adjusting to insanity is creating problems to mirror that insanity. So we're causing the disease to the degree that we're causing the disease. At least we're under, if there are other outside influences like toxic waste and radioactivity and any kind of other poison that we may, our body's weakened state is not better off as a result to deal with those things. It becomes more susceptible to those things. So again, we become harmoniously and intimately connected to the entire flow of everything that's happening.
Yeah, it's very insightful. It's very clear.
Well, and Gabe, you couldn't think that if you didn't know that. Because within the obsessive nature, if there was no greater knowing, all that we would be is insane all the time, doing what we're doing without any choice, literally. But that isn't the case. We wouldn't feel wrong as much as we tend to if we didn't know better. That awareness is that we're already sharing something in common. We're just not talking about it as though it's common. While we've had it in common the whole time, we've been operating on the basis of this idea of individuation and separateness and split personality and distance and don't belong and can't find my place and keep looking but can't find, etc. We've already got it. We're already there. There is no there, as a matter of fact, because it isn't a place, it's an essence. It's a knowing nature that's absolute. That's our nature. What would an infinite source give to anything Doesn't mean that we can't think of it in other terms, but there again lies the freedom that we have to think whatever we want. We can think God's to blame, or that God is a man in the sky at a distance, always away from us. How would that be possible if God is infinite? We talk about God as in those infinite terms, but we don't think about infinite as infinite in human terms. We think about it as something somewhere else with somebody else. Some people are really spiritual and others are not. That's not true. It's just, you can wear a turban and you can wear Nikes. What's the difference? It's a choice. It's a pair of shoes or a hat. So you're an architect,
Some days.
a field in which there is great possibility. And sometimes the freedom of that possibility can be daunting, especially when you begin designing and thinking about things. Like, what do you do the basic parameters, but the potential is extraordinary in terms of the variety of, once you put a pen down on a piece of paper, it begins to define the thing. That becomes the start point, just like in the thinking. I'm tracking my experience now back to the roots of my thinking about my thinking. The enormity of possibilities is extraordinary, but I'm not condemned to make any choice. I have absolutely no obligation to come up with a choice, but within the reactive nature, thinking I need to get it done, I start crippling my capacity to express that awareness in its fullness in the best way I can, because it feels daunting to have so much freedom, because I've been suffering under a lack of freedom and literally being a hostage. I've taken my own self hostage to my own self and wonder why I feel depleted and lacking and unable to face things that can be extraordinarily inspiring. Because I haven't been operating on the basis of inspiration. I've been largely operating on the basis of desperation, which is all induced by the thinking I do, imposed by the thinking I do, or choose to do. It's not an accident and it's not a coincidence until coincidence is seen as coincidence, simultaneously happening. Everything is simultaneously happening all the time. And to think in absolute terms is really simple. When a lie is a lie, it's true. When wrong is wrong, that's right.
I mean, I don't know how to put this. Do you think people are afraid of that freedom?
Absolutely. Because it will dispel every bit of fear they've been generating and discount the life they thought they had and led. It's exactly what, through history and the fairy tales and all that, that idea of facing yourself is the most horrendous, horrible thing to do, because the self you're facing isn't who you are. The Never Ending Story was a great kids movie that had that so clearly portrayed, illustrated. The remnants of all the armor and the saddles and all the great knights that faced this arch, that all they had to do is look at themselves honestly. And they disintegrated in the face of not being able to do that. All the bravado, all the confidence, all the strength, all the achievements, all the wars won, nothing held up. But the kid, the teenager, walked right through it. He wasn't so developed as a mature adult that he did immature, unlike adult things. So maturing typically in nature creates sweetness in fruit, and yet it often creates bitterness in humans. And I would say that maturing isn't really mature. Again, we've twisted it. We've said if you do these things and submit yourself to these rigors and are true to these things, you'll be better. They're rituals. That isn't reality, because reality is free. Reality is free to allow us to do everything we want. We don't have to do anything. Think about the word have to being used in that sentence. I have to do that. That's not true. The word have is about possessing. If I have something, I know I have it. And I know that I cannot have it at the same time. But within the essence of an absolute source, it has us. And I can't not have that. I can't let go of what has me. I can't let go of nature. I can't let go of gravity. I mean, we have metaphors within our own physical experience that we're having here, the seeming physical experience that we're having, that point to all of this. If we're looking honestly, we'll see it and laugh at the sideshow going on that isn't the sideshow, it's the main attraction, rather than the distraction of trying to pay attention to things that compel me in other directions to keep from the pain I'm suffering and make believe that somehow it's not happening as a result.
Yeah, that's something I didn't consider, but maybe is true, is the fear of the freedom. The fear
Yeah.
of,
Well, it isn't really, we're really not experiencing the fear of the freedom. It's knowing the freedom allows us to see the fear we're creating by the hostage we've taken.
yeah,
It's starting to actually see it clearly. It's not the freedom that scares us. It's like when the light comes on, if you've been thinking there's ghosts in the room and they're not there, it sort of dispels all the rumors you've developed. And then typically with kids, when the light goes back off, they're back to the exact same thought. We think if it's in the dark, it must be doing what we imagine. When in fact, if we're haunted, what we're imagining are things that are haunting us because we're doing haunting things. We're creating them. We're hiding them. We're pretending they're in the dark. They're not me. I'm not doing it. That's what we call the subconscious. We're very much aware of it. We talk about it as something we have nothing to do with and can't do anything about, cleverly, by the way, right?
mhm.
People say, well, I can't do anything about my subconscious. I say, that's interesting. That's the same position that an addict takes about their drinking and their heroin use. What else can I do? I'm just destined to keep doing the wrong thing. That's an addictive thought. It's a suicidal thought, too. It's a suicidal tendency, and it's killing us under the anxiety and stress we're denying is actually happening while we're taking momentary reliefs of being everything we need and all that we need. These little glimpses of relief for split seconds that turn into a form of deterioration very quickly because we're deteriorating, disintegrating literally through our experience. We're not really disintegrating because we're fully integrated, but our body is beginning to take on the effects of the thinking we're doing as a manifestation of that thinking. People tend to talk about becoming manifestors. We're already doing it. We're manifesting the entire experience we're having, and our body is either suffering or healing as a result of that manifestation. Left to do what it's designed to do, it will heal. Subject to more and more of the same thinking that's sick, it will get diseased. Period. Stress constricts our vessels. It disallows the blood to carry the oxygen and all the minerals and the vitamins, everything that we need to be healthy. It's not an accident. We're doing it. We're choosing it. And we're making believe we have nothing to do with it. That I would say is a critical error worth noting. I'm talking about. So I know your time is short. If there's any point to this today, it's beginning to see that if truth is true, it's just true, period. And if you notice, that lines up. But then if truth is false, it's false. And there isn't anything false in truth. In reality, there's nothing unreal, or it wouldn't be reality. We can think of things that are unreal as being real. And here again starts the whole tirade of our capacity to imagine and turn that imagination that has all of the promise in it that we can develop into a direction that would be usefully whole for everyone, everywhere, all the time, turns it into a great liability. The same thing that is the greatest asset becomes the greatest liability in terms of misutilizing it by mistaking our identity for what we think we are rather than noticing we are as we are and things are as they are. And everything that's happening right now is happening right now. And all that's possible is possible right now. And that includes thinking the impossible is possible. Doesn't mean it's going to be possible, but it's possible to think that. So again, it puts thinking in an accountable state because it's something we can do. It's just not something we're going to be able to utilize and perfect in any meaningful way. The meaning of it will create the destruction and the havoc that is designed to give us an indication that we're on the wrong path. Just like swimming upstream. At some point, becomes obvious you're not going to win that swim meet.
Hmm.
You're not going to get to the top of the river. It's just not enough energy because that energy is being carried down naturally, which is why rivers go downhill. And in rare instances, they go uphill slightly from their momentum. But it's very rare and very unusual.
Well, no, Jack, this is our experience and our conversations have been literally life changing for me, and I appreciate you. But for those listening, that there can be a process and a solution to this way of thinking, this way of I want to say in thinking, the negative of the inverse of thinking. But yeah, and just a quick thing too, like there's real numbers and imaginary numbers in mathematics. Not
Right.
all those imaginary numbers are those weird square root of -1 and all that kind of
Well, and what do they also call those?
irrational.
Exactly. Think about it. We know that numbers can be irrational, but we're afraid to admit our thinking may be.
Yeah.
That's great. So in thinking about this and beginning to notice this, it doesn't take more wrong thought, but just notice that there's an awareness in each of us. That I hear this a lot when I speak in groups. Somebody will say, I seem to know what you're saying is right, but I don't understand it. And if we've been misunderstanding all along as understanding, we've been misutilizing our whole rational capacity to really translate our body language, our experience, that awareness that we have that's natural. We haven't been taking it as natural, so we've been denying it. We've been learning to ignore it and think it isn't real and think it isn't true. When in fact, that guidance system that tells us feel wrong, when people say they feel wrong, I try to direct them to the fact the thought they're having is wrong and mention it to them. They're just feeling their thinking. And that feeling is our guidance system. It offers us perspective. It's the same thing we're trying to get by blaming everyone else. But what we're trying to get out of blaming everyone else is maintain the righteousness that we've developed about the thing we're doing that's wrong. And it's always going to be wrong. Doesn't matter how righteous we get, doesn't matter how much faith we have. That's why people think you have to have more and more faith. I always need to develop my faith. Why? Because I'm thinking about thoughts that are faithless. I'm thinking about thoughts that are hopeless. I'm thinking about thoughts that are truthless. They have no basis in reality. They're simply imagined. And getting back to the fear thing, if you're afraid of letting go of this, I guarantee you are free to pick it up anytime you like. Just like in sobriety. I remember early on, somebody said, get 30 days, and if you want to go back out, you're welcome to all the misery that comes with it. That's the freedom of sobriety. Freedom of sobriety is not telling people what to do, it's telling them what they can do honestly and let them decide. Each of us makes these decisions. Each of us are making the choices that are impacting our experience right now. Each of us make the choices that are impacting the DNA structure that we pass on to every successive generation. And that is simultaneously right now the sum total of the experience that we are having based on that DNA that we received. It may have been fixed when we got it initially, but it has been changing and adapting to what we've been doing with it since. So to think of it as something that can't be overcome is to miss the fact that it's changing right now, and we are also changing by impact of everyone everywhere else, by everything we do. So we are either sending reactivity into that grid, or we are sending reassurance into that grid. We are sending lies into that grid, which is reactivity and defensiveness and defiance and denial, or we are actually feeding peace and allowing that peace. We're not feeding it, we're just allowing that peace. It's already the natural state of our existence to be recognized and relieve the stress that comes with those other with the denial and the defiance and the fight. Just naturally happens. Seeing it is disturbing. Course in Miracles starts with that. So if you're listening to this correctly, you should be disturbed, I think it says. Because what we've been doing is disturbing for a long time. And if you look out into the world, there are plenty of disturbances. You don't need to make them up to begin to notice them. But if you can notice them that are actually happening, you can actually do something about them rather than cause more of them and think it's the only choice we have. Each of us makes that choice. And collectively, if we all do that, there's another absolute reckoning. It's not what I do that I impact everyone, but it's what everyone is doing that has the greatest impact on each of us. Seems impossible until you start noticing that possibility has always been possible, and so too has the imagination that impossibility is possible. It can seem impossible and still be possible.
Yeah.
So we can lie about that in either direction. And the truth ultimately reveals in the value that's provided and the given and the benefits that endure and that are passed on to everyone. I know you have a heart out.
Yeah, I got it. Cool.
And give your wife my best, and I
Yes.
will enjoy your day today. I know you had an anniversary yesterday. It's her birthday today. So you got a double header on a weekend.
Yeah. But it's a good Saturday, Sunday. The weather's great. And right now my thoughts are real. So I'm aligned.
Yeah, thoughts may be real, but the how and the what are the choices we make in them. And if we're feeling discontent, it's because the how and the what of the thinking has no content. It's just imagined. Imagination is great. When you begin to think it's reality, reality doesn't need any help. It doesn't need our imagination. But when we begin to imagine things real as real, now we have the potential to realize those things and have everyone benefit. Because the law of nature is not changing. Life's laws are already in place. They're standing by for us to utilize in any way we choose. And they're always available in full, not in part, not part-time, sometime, somewhere, but now and here. Catch you, young man.
Okay. See you around campus. Thanks, Jack.
Bye. Thanks. Love you.
Love you too.